Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be talking about gear in Mythic Pluses and a pretty significant nerf that Blizzard added into M+, end of dungeon gear. That means at the end of finishing a dungeon, after you time it or fail the key, maybe the tank pulled one extra mob that was way too difficult for your healer, and you open the chest with your loot. Now that loot is apparently gonna be nerfed in comparison to how the system functioned in BFA. Now, off the bat, you're thinking that, man, if I do M pluses and I'm gonna get worse gear than what? Heroic? And it does seem that this gear is gonna be lower item of the Heroic. It's probably still going to be relevant gear that's still good, but that end of dungeon gear will probably have some really weird consequences because of it. I want to discuss why Blizzard did this, as well as some of the other things that has to do with Mythic Plus. Before we dive into the gear, let's talk about one more update that M+ has gotten recently, and that is going to be class utility. Certain classes bring certain things to the table, and whether you're doing raids, PvP, or Mythic Plus, certain utilities are really strong and hard to give up for your group, especially when it comes to trying to figure out the best comp. You want to have battle res is one of the most important things in the game. Bloodlust for sure, as many class buffs as possible, but with some of the changes that Blizzard is making in Shadowlands, it looks like they have diminished or removed certain unused items that could almost replace functionality of a class. For example, a priest, which isn't the most popular class to bring into Mythic Pluses by a variety of groups and or pugs, bring in a 10% stamina buff. Stamina is huge. You could bring the priest, or you could just simply go with the scroll that could apply to your group a 7% stamina buff. It's not quite 10, but that 3% difference for most players doesn't really make that much of a thing. In Shadowlands, however, scrolls have been removed for the extra bonuses, so you bring in a priest and you not bringing a priest is actually now going to be a loss of 5% stamina. It's not as bad as 10, but still the 5% stamina that your group is now missing. Where Shadow Priests generally, let's say they're the worst Mythic Plus for whatever reason. They come out, Blizzard tunes them, and for some reason they end up being at the bottom of the DPS, bottom of the heals, which most likely won't happen because, well, healers and Shadow Priests are looking pretty good so far. But let's say they are, at least that priest brings one utility that's unique to them, which is the stamina buff. So this way some groups might even go for, okay, we have a little bit less damage, or for whatever reason we have a priest, but at least the stamina buff might let our tank survive certain big hitter mechanics. So it could be maybe a class utility that you might be able to leverage when trying to apply for groups. Another utility that's been actually completely replaced in BFA was, well, the Bloodlust. Of course, getting that extra haste when you bring a shaman or a mage is nice, but you could just bring the drums and you won't really be losing too much, making those classes with that unique utility a lot less needed or less necessary. In Shadowlands, the drums are still in the game, but they are heavily nerfed, where now when bringing a shaman or a mage, or maybe the hunter with a ferocity pet, which by the way can bloodlust, now most groups are going to have a harder time deciding, well, do we want bloodlust, like a proper one, or do we want to go with this item that's not nearly as good? However, the one utility that you won't have to really choose too much on, with the help of professions, is going to be the battle engineering res. It looks like Wowhead was able to dig up an item for beta, so it looks like you might still be able to, with the help of engineering, bring a battle res even if your class doesn't bring one. How many classes actually can battle res right now? Currently we have druids, we have warlocks, we have death knights, and is that really it? I guess certain utilities for Blizzard are really on a high priority, and if classes just simply don't bring it, then it's going to be harder to justify. But hopefully we won't see more comps like we did in BFA of just like double rogue plus demon hunter, everybody who's an NG, and everybody has battle res. But I'm still hoping that we'll see more diversity of variety of different classes that will be playing in Mythic Pluses, whether it's in MDI or whether it's in pugs. And it seems that Blizzard decided that on battle res, this is where they're going to put the foot down. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about B-res not being a solo unique class utility? Next, let's talk about the actual item level nerf that happened recently with Mythic Pluses. So this item level nerf only affects Mythic Pluses at the end of the run, after you have completed or failed your run, and you get to loot the gear from the end of the run chest. This gear can scale, and generally in Battle for Azeroth, at about a 10 Mythic Plus level, it gave you decent gear, but not quite on the heroic level. But if you did a 15, which Blizzard deemed to be like the highest cap, probably the strongest that it can go, and of course you can push the key further than that for Raid or IO, but that was like the Blizzard's actual limit for the maximum amount of difficulty to gear ratio. If you did a 15, you got yourself gear equivalent to a heroic raid piece. Some of those Mythic Plus dungeons, depending on the affix, at a level 15 are quite challenging, so having heroic level gear at the end of that run be as a reward was actually a decent trade-off. But recently Blizzard changed it, so the item level of that end dungeon gear at level 15, as well as scaling with the rest of the levels, is going to now be 3 item levels below heroic raid gear. So at the end of the run, at a 15, your gear is going to be 210 item level. Heroic raid gear is going to be 213. I know, you're probably saying to yourself, well, 3 item level doesn't make that big of a difference, really, does it? And it's true, it is a weird change. Why would Blizzard add that, or take away, I guess, 3 item levels away from Mythic Pluses? Let's first talk about why Blizzard might have done this, and then talk about the community reaction. Now, with this change, you will not be able to trade heroic raid loot. So let's say before the new raid is out, you and your guild runs a bunch of Mythic Pluses to make sure that everybody, well, at least in BFA, would be head to toe in as high of item level gear as possible. You don't need to finish these dungeons on time, you just need to complete them. Whether it takes long or not, you could technically get yourself head to toe covered in already before the raid heroic item level. So that when you go into the raid, as your guild, let's say the healer needs a certain trinket, every healer can now trade specific trinkets or specific items to specific players, since everybody already has heroic level loot. So anybody going into Castle Nathria, hoping to be already head-to-toe Mythic item level, to be able to trade that gear amongst your guildies, you will no longer be able to do that. So the 3 item levels will prevent you from being able to trade gear, since Warforging and Titan Forging are also gone, so there's no potential for you to get higher item level than what the game dictates. It does seem like this change is mostly done for guilds like Limit that are trying to go for world first, so you don't have any kind of cheesy things happening. And I guess if, let's say, you were in a really crappy guild that really did have some kind of tyrant of a GM that said everybody got a gear in Mythic Pluses and then forced you to trade loot, I guess if you're one of those players in that kind of position, then I could see that this change kind of at least lets you keep your gear. But I don't think it's just such a weird change. It feels like it only affects the top 1% of 1%, and it just creates more confusion, I think, than anything. However, the community, though, themselves have been pretty upset with this change. A lot of people, even the 3 item levels, to some is a massive difference. And I guess if you are trying to be super competitive, and Mythic Pluses is your best way of getting gear, if you are someone who runs a lot of Mythic Pluses and you want to push keys for Mythic Pluses, now your gear is actually just downgraded. Because there are some people that just do M+ in World of Warcraft. It's been one of the pillars of the gameplay between raids, PvP, as well as M+. And it's enjoyable by so many players. Some people even look at the World of Warcraft endgame as you either PvP, M+, or raid, but now it seems like Blizzard is kind of trying to structure dungeons under raids as part of like the PvE. So you almost have PvP side of the game and PvE. PvP, you have Stardew Battlegrounds, and then you head into arenas, and then you climb that rating. So in PvE, I guess it would be you start in dungeons, and then you climb the levels of difficulty inside of raids. But I feel like that kind of doesn't work in nowadays, because Mythic Plus is almost like its own beast. There's its own metas. People specialize in Mythic Pluses, which can be completely different from raiding. The difficulty itself, even on 5 people in Mythic Pluses, can also be difficult in its own wake. If you're someone who is afraid that your gear from Mythic Plus is going to be worthless, or if you're someone who does, however, feel, do I even need to do Mythic Plus anymore? You still have a reason to do M+. The gear from Mythic Plus, I feel like, at least to me, has been easier to acquire, because you need to only get 5 people together instead of 10 or 20 in order to raid. It's also a little bit quicker, as you can get through a dungeon fairly quickly. We are going to be doing Mythic Pluses in order to get certain conduits, certain legendary recipes, so there's definitely a use for it there. But also the gear, if you do Mythic Pluses and you do raids and PvP, that's going to be more different gear for you to pick from your end of the week chest. I feel like Mythic Pluses is still going to be relevant content. I don't think a lot of us are going to drop them all together. I think that if you're someone who does have a guild that wants to bring your ults to a heroic run, you might be more inspired to want to get more heroics done on ults, but I don't think this really changes things too much, but it definitely did upset a lot of people. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts about this change to Mythic Plus, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.